Oh, it's only going to get better with time.
I think this is a huge thing for BYU. This is the start of something really beautiful.
If he can come back, that changes the upside for BYU. BYU might be a top 10 team. If you get the right pieces around, we're talking about some territory maybe BYU's never been to.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation. We are live in Studio B. Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Spencer Linton. That is Jarom Jordan. Week. It is Masters Week.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Are they going to have it on some TVs on a certain cruise ship? Or
one can only hope. At least the first 3 days have said cruising with the Cougs excursion. Come on.
Can't wait.
They've got to make that happen.
If not, going to be okay, trust me.
Hey, let's bring in one of the greatest shooters in BYU basketball history and a man who has strong opinions and is good friends with Egor Demin. He is Jonathan Tavernari on BYU Sports Nation. JT, good to have you back on the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. First things first, shout out to Brazil. Jarom Jordan, another temple in Campo Grande.
Campo Grande. Let's go.
Mato Grosso do Sul. And then I do have a question. Spencer, what's your handicap right now?
My handicap in golf is probably about a 14.
Okay. All right. I mean, I see you wearing the Masters, so in my mind, you're buddies with Tony Finau and, Mike Weir and all of those guys. And so, I mean, to have the confidence to wear that around with a 14, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how that plays out. So,
I think it has nothing to do with his game and just a celebration of said game.
Does it require an ego and confidence to wear gear that has the Masters logo on it?
No, it doesn't. Jaron, thanks for calling me out, and I feel like crap now. But that's okay. That's all right. I'm all right with that, guys.
Hey, way to post up behind a picture of Jesus, after General Conference. That's good. Let's talk about Egor Demin, by the way. Egor is giving us some cryptic social media messages. Just give me a pen and paper. And it's like, I'll run over and give you a pen and paper right now. Let's sign you up, Doc. Are you feeling like he might come back?
So I will say this. It's a bold strategy also to quote a nihilist, right? And have the quotes. After going to General Conference and playing at BYU, I curious about that strategy. I have a good relationship with Egor. And, I actually gave him a hard time yesterday. I was like, how can you just be a conference, the conference center? You don't even button your top button and the tie's loose. I was giving him a hard time about that. And, but I will say this. Obviously, you have boundaries in relationships, and I've shared with you guys before. And, Jeremy, you remember this after a game. I went to talk to him, and it's just to let him be a kid and anything and everything but basketball. So what I'm going to share right now, it's me reading between the lines of what I'm seeing it's happening, right? I look at Dallin Hall entering the portal, and the way that he worded that, it's not necessarily someone that, hey, I might come back. Hey, I may be coming back here. It was someone that came across as, I think my time at BYU is done. So from that perspective, I personally believe Egor is coming back. That's my opinion. But then you look at Elijah entering the transfer portal, and that one is kind of a head scratcher to me. You guys were mentioning in the previous segment about Houston and about, BYU just having a hard time with them. I think Elijah would have handled a lot of those guards, incredibly, hadn't given the opportunity, but they just didn't pan out that way. And so I think that between the possibility of playing with AJ, Egor, and this is the one thing I will say for my relationship, I will quote Egor word for word. He freaking loves BYU and Provo and everything about it. Obviously he has a very close relationship and friendship with Delaney Gibbs. And there's a lot of things that play into that factor, right? But he truly loves Provo. He truly loves BYU. The environment, it's something very special to him. Is that enough to keep him in Provo? I don't know. All of the experts have him as easily a top 20 in a draft, definitely a first rounder. That's guaranteed money for 3 years, right? And so how does that play out in his decision with his camp? I don't know. I'm curious to see. But, to kind of answer the point that you guys had made in the previous segment, if he does come back, you know, Egor at the 1, Richie at the 2, AJ at the 3. You have someone be the 4-man, maybe, you know, Diomande, and then Keba at the 5, which Keba coming back is massive. You are correct, Jerem. I don't know if it was you or Spencer said that's uncharted territory for BYU and the potential that they have as a team.
I mean, just think about 2 lottery picks for BYU basketball.
And Richie, who you would think could be a pick next year too, potentially in the second round.
JT, this is a team that hasn't had a single draft pick since Jimmer Fredette was selected 10th overall 14 years ago. So to go from that to this is a wild swing of events. But what benefits BYU the most? All these guys coming back and running it back? Or do we just need to start the pipeline to the NBA and say, look, it works. Come play 1 year in BYU and it works?
So I'm going to share my opinion as a former player, not necessarily of BYU, but as a former professional player and also as a BYU fan. As a former professional player, the ability that you have to stack a team and go do something special, it doesn't happen very often, right? Which is why, you know, Jerem, I think you can relate to this. And which is why I give Trent Placet such a hard time for not coming back for his senior year, because Jimmer, Jackson, Lee, myself, and Trent, that could have been something extremely special as a team you put together on that 2008-2009 team, right? And so from that perspective, I see that for BYU as a program, the best thing that they can do, you know, in terms of winning and having success is to have, you know, Egor come back and make a very deep run in the NCAA tournament, even get into the Elite Eight or a potential Final Four. Now, as a BYU fan that is hoping the program starts this pipeline, to your point, Spencer, I would personally say if Egor goes and gets drafted this year, and then next year, AJ is a top 5 pick. Richie goes to the NBA. At that point, with Kevin Young having the time that he has on his hands now, how is BYU not a consistently top 10, top 15, you know, recruiting class over and over again? How does that work? How does Kevin Young not make that work over and over again? And so I think there are pros and cons on both sides. You know, I would probably lean on the side of making history, right? You go back and look at Portland Trailblazers fan, and they still talk about the title that Bill Walton gave them on the 70s. And so, yeah. And so it's one of the things that I would say, come back, make history. You know, but I think also in terms of the pipeline, how does AJ perform at BYU, right? I mean, all of his games are pretty much sold out. We know that. And how is that going to unravel with his success and the draft and AJ reaching out to other, you know, future prospects? And so I don't think there's a wrong answer in which path to follow.
Where does this team and what they did this year, just the third Final Four, or excuse me, Sweet 16, I'm excited about next year, apparently. Sweet 16 in program history. Where do you put this team? Because I think they automatically go top 3.
I agree with you. You know, I would definitely say, you know, the Elite Eight, you know, run with Danny Ainge, that was special. You know, obviously Jimmer Mania would probably be number 2, and this team would be up there. Here's the thing, though, right? If we consider all of BYU history, as both of you also know this just as well as I do, if not much better, in the 20s and 30s, BYU was a powerhouse, you know, getting a lot of success on the NITs and on the conferences. And also in the 15s, you know, with Munson and the other guy that had his, you know, jersey retired. I forgot his name. Yep. Yeah, Hutchins and Munson. And so they won national championships. And so, but if you talk about new era of basketball, this is the 3rd best team in BYU history, you know, bar none. I would then probably say after that, you know, the team that I was a part of in 2010, my senior year, when we won 30 games in a season, it will be after that. But I agree with you on the top 3. Sports are all based out of results. You know, I remember always having conversations with Tom Homo about this. You know, the more results you have, the better things are going to, you know, happen to those involved. And so it's difficult to not say this team is one of the top 3 in BYU history.
Jonathan Tavernari, former BYU basketball sharpshooter, is on BYU Sports Nation. Well, we know for a surety that A.J. DeBonta will be at BYU next year, as will Xavier Staten and Keba Keita. So those three are in, JT. What does the return of Keba Keita and him declaring that he's back for another year mean for the future of BYU basketball?
He brings something that BYU just hasn't had consistently throughout all of its basketball history. How many times have we seen a center, be as athletic and dominant and, just an impactful defensive, specimen, and, to be able to finish at the rim when he does. I will say I think Keba is a one or two, skills away from being a perennial ABA player. I think if Keba can develop a 10 to 12 footer little jumper, maybe a little floater with one hand, and then he can get his free throw shooting to about 70%. That's yet another NBA player that's going to be on the roster, for BYU's next year and the year after that in the league. He is so good. The timing that he has in blocking and rebounding is just second to none. Somebody posted something on X, which is, Keba always had the potential to do what he is doing right now. And, I think that's the difference between Utah and BYU is Kevin Young was able to truly maximize the ceiling of Keba. And, we kind of saw that ceiling. That's one of the things that you and I think we talked on an interview, or Spencer, that's something you and I talked about during the Big 12 tournament. BYU ceiling kept being pushed up and up and up. And so they would perform well and do something and would go, wow, I can't believe they could be this good. And then they would play another game and then go, wow, I didn't know that they could be this good. And so I think a lot of that also has to do with Keba and his defensive presence. And so, BYU is stacked. We haven't even mentioned, Xavier coming in. We haven't even talked about Dawson Baker. I reached out to Trevin now and asked him to connect me with Dawson. I think Dawson can have the mindset to try to be the sixth man of the year next year. I think that is a individual goal that would very much align with the team goals of winning and what you need from Dawson. And so I hope to have a chance to work with him this summer. I think BYU right now is an elite sharpshooter away from getting to be above what they were this year. Obviously Trevin Nell is not coming back for another year. There'll probably be 8 years of Trevin Nell at BYU, which is crazy. But I think when you have a sharpshooter like that and maybe you tweak lineups a little bit here and there, even with Diamande being a defensive presence, very much reminding of Mawat Mag. And so, Kevin Young did amazing with only about a half of an off season to work with while paying attention to his job with the Phoenix Suns. And so I'm very interested to see what's going to happen this year with him having the full summer and the full transfer portal to work with.
Jonathan Tavernari on BYU Sports Nation. JT, always good to catch up with you, man, and talk some BYU hoops. I'm just interested to see how different this team is 1 week from now because things change so fast.
And that's the thing, right? You don't know who's going to come back from the portal, who's going to enter the portal. It's a wild west on that perspective, And the one thing I want to say, and I know, our time is up, I just want to share one thing. BYU, Kevin Young, the athletic department, Tom Homo, Brian Santiago. When I mean BYU, I mean these guys around the basketball program. They need to be given a ton of credit in how they're handling NIL. NIL is not being thrown around BYU just for money, just to get any type of player. They're being handled in a way like, hey, this is the money that you're going to have. This is your role. This is your job. And it's so different than what I am experiencing with former teammates of mine, even at Florida. Tarian Green, someone that I played with and against in Europe, and he's a coach at UF right now. BYU, Bill Self, you have the clip that you guys have played a lot. It says, BYU is the sleeping giant, right? BYU is the one that, watch out for. BYU is doing NIL the right way, the best way possible. I can speak for basketball because I'm close to the collective. incredible props to those guys for handling things the way they're doing.
Jonathan Tavernari on BYU Sports Nation. Good to talk to you, JT. Thanks for the time.
Falou.
Até mais, abraço.